Welcome, everyone. This is CK Lin with my dear friend David Maloley. He is the host of The Relentless Dentist, and he's been doing this since 2013, 7 years, almost 8 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How many episodes?
350 roughly.
350 episodes. Amazing. So we are at the presence of greatness of a master. Um, so as you know, we are here to discuss the meta layer of podcasting, the craft of podcasting. So, opening question for you, David. Um, Knowing what you know now, 350 ish episodes, what would you say to someone, to the younger David who's starting maybe episode one, maybe episode 10? What would you say to that early phase of, you know, David?
In short, be consistent. I sometimes would get a little frustrated with the numbers or the fact that I was just projecting out into the world and not getting a lot of feedback. And there's enough of a delay there that sometimes the people that you're helping stay quiet for a long time. And so there were times where I got bored or I thought, hey, I've already talked to everyone in the industry that I wanted to, and I'd go on hiatus. And I wouldn't be announced hiatus, I would just stop scheduling it. And the one thing that I wish I would have appreciated is the value of the reps, because I come from a place where I went in, I'm painfully shy growing up. And so it was a thrust forward into courage that I couldn't have appreciated. It was a thrust forward into a whole new world of network and friends that I wouldn't have appreciated. But now, like Steve Jobs, the dots connect when I look backwards, and I had no idea. It was literally like a entrepreneurial seizure where I was like, the podcast I want doesn't exist. I'm going to build it. So I think a consistency, making sure that I was out there every week, creating new conversations and new connections would have been the big win for me.
So let me do a quick recap. So knowing what you know now, you'll look back and advise younger David consistency. You know, after that lightning the bottle initial lightning struck, and then you would say to him, "Hey, keep going." So let me make it even more concrete. Do you believe in the idea of like a regular publishing schedule? Is that something that you believe in?
For me, it would have worked better if I'm a creature of routine. If I would record one or two podcasts a week, that would have been ideal for me. But I'm also high quick start, low follow through. So without that schedule, I have to protect myself from myself. And if I don't have that regimen, then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, it's been 6 weeks since I've published something. So I think just like any other business or when I coach, it has to fit you. And I'm not I tend to resent most rules. And so I don't want to create one. But for me, for sure, a weekly podcast sent out on every Wednesday at 5 a.m. would have been the thing that I wish I would have done.
Yeah, other people see me as super structure because I,
Mm-hmm.
I am, compared to regular, on people on average, I'm definitely very disciplined. But I have yet to get to a point of like a regular schedule, no matter what, a
Yeah.
cadence. So how long did it take you to actually get there? So
I
the
was
journey
never
is
that
so far. So the journey so far is 7 years, almost eight. At what point did you get to a point where it's just like a clockwork?
Well, I had my other business until just a year ago. So not until the last year did I take this anything more than just a hobby or a side hustle. So
Hmm.
just in the last year was where I really thought like, if I'm consistent, if I'm on a mission and I want to be consistent about delivering value and truly being the person I say I'm going to be, and being a coach and a mentor to dentists who want to control their own destiny, run their own practice, make sure it drives a significant life or a life of significance, I need to be regular, because I know that I'm that same way as a listener. I'm looking forward to the next episode. And if the host lets me down for a significant amount of time, I'm going to go looking for something else. So I
Mm.
had to put myself in the shoes of somebody that might be listening to my show.
Okay, so you self-transpose who you are and your listener. So hey, if I'm thinking about it this way, if my consumption habits is, I expect regular, feed basically,
Hmm.
right? If I don't get fed, I'm gonna go look for some
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the 7 or 8 years, at what point was sort of the tipping point for you, where there's signal coming back and say, "Hey, this is not just going to black hole somewhere. This is not
Yeah.
just my self indulgent, hearing myself talk or interviewing somebody else, and it's actually making a difference somewhere." Whoa, does that mean anything?
Really, for me, it was when I started speaking on stage, because then
Mm.
people would say, "Oh, I feel like I hear when you write something, I hear it in my ears now." Like, they were very familiar with me, and my target audience tends to be fairly introverted. So while you might feel gratitude, it may not be, I need to reach out and tell them that this episode shifted my entire career. So it was probably 2 years later that it started leading to speaking engagements. And
So
I was,
2 years. So 2 years into the 7-year journey.
yeah.
Okay.
So I started in 2013. In 2015, I was the first dentist with a podcast. There was one other dental consultant with a podcast. So it was easy to get traction because we were first to market. But then there was a tribe of maybe 12 dental podcasters, and they started a convention called Voices of Dentistry. And that's the thing that really helped all of us get traction, because that launched new podcasters that people niched down. Some were very clinical. I was very business and entrepreneurial. So that was the first significant stage that I spoke on. And so there was like a tribe of tribes, so to speak, there. And that's when I knew that I was making a significant impact on the industry.
So it's almost like a trade association of podcaster of dental podcasters, basically.
Yeah. Two of my friends launched it, and it still exists, and
Yeah.
it's gotten bigger and bigger every year. I think we've gone in 5 years from two dental podcasts to probably 100 in the industry.
Mm.
And
Wow.
it's shaped the way a dental student can now get their business training while they're getting their clinical training. So I think it's completely shifted the way an aspiring, like in my case, a aspiring practice owner, aspiring entrepreneur, can now get this running start, and the things that would have cost you $30K in consulting fees now are available for free. So that shift has all happened in the last handful of years.
Yeah. So that business training for dentists is being democratized,
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it a lot. Um, Sort of forward looking, and this is more curiosity. We don't have to have an answer here, but in my mind, the whole idea of brand building and media is becoming more and more specialized, because in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, back in the 90s, if you have a blog, you're like, that's your calling card. Then it's your Twitter followers, then it's your Instagram followers, and then now today is podcast. You
Mm-hmm.
still have some cachet with podcasts, but at some point, I think going forward in the future, I think very, very soon you need like a documentary, because I've seen
Mm,
friends who
so
are thought
interesting.
leaders in the space. They now are going to, filming their own documentary. So now, as you can see, more and more budgets are putting into this personal brand,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quite fascinating from my point of view. And if you look at the upstart of masterclass.com as an
Yes.
example,
Mm-hmm.
so the whole idea of professional development media, I believe, was started late 90s. Lynda.com is the earliest I can
Okay.
remember, right? Lynda.com, and
Mm-hmm.
helping designers, with professional skills. And then you have like Khan Academy and so on and so forth. And now we see this, movie level budget going to each master class on masterclass.com, and people love it, right? They want that production value, they want that top talent and top
Yeah.
practitioner,
Yeah.
and the narratives and the voiceovers and so on and so on. And I can kind of see a parallel trajectory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you can get free content on YouTube, but I think for specialized content like dentistry practitioner best practices. Could be a masterclass.com for dentists, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I mean, we're lowering the barrier to entry as price, access. I mean, in the industry, I knew that if I wanted to get information, I was going to spend 3 days away from work. I was going to get on a plane. I was going to leave my family. I was going to spend a night in an expensive hotel and probably spend $1,000 a day on tuition. And now you just see that completely being disrupted, which is amazing because now in our industry, at least, these people who are tech savvy that are in their early stage in the career are doing what some people weren't able to do in their entire career because they're stacking up their skills, they're stacking up their mindsets, and they're becoming so valuable to their patients or team or whatever they're aspiring to do. And it's happening in record time because of the trends that you're talking about.
Yeah. So anyways, so that's the trend, right? So we don't know
Yeah.
what the future will bring, but that at least that's the trend line. I can kind of see already what's happening. But since this is a conversation tailoring for people who are in the starting phase of their podcast, why don't we actually talk a little bit about sort of the format?
Okay.
Now, and actually, before we even talk about the format, and this is front of the coin, back of the coin type question, right? Were you really, really clear about your specific audience avatar profile when you first
I wouldn't
started?
say very specific. I knew I wasn't going clinical. I knew that they were practice owners or aspiring practice owners. So, in that frame, I've gotten more and more towards leadership because I realize that's where the pain is how do I get all these people to do what's in the best interest of the practice and the patient while I'm completely occupied doing a root canal in operatory 3. So, but entrepreneurial dentist was my focus and frame, and I knew that it would communicate different when they were my peers as opposed to these are my target audience, and I had nothing to sell. So,
Wait, back up. So what do you mean target audience versus peers? Can you say more about that?
so in my industry, I think my colleagues get preyed upon a lot because they know that there's certain things that they're really good at and there's certain things that they're kind of oblivious to. And there tends to be cash flow in the practice. So I can charge you 10x for dental cabinet versus cabinet, or I can charge you 10x for dental website versus website. And so I feel like part of my job as a thought leader in industry is to protect my colleagues from being preyed upon and someone just saying, I do this, here's lucrative target market, let's marry the two and I'll use them as a target market. I communicated with them as they were my trusted peers. In
I
fact,
see.
sometimes I found myself interviewing people that I didn't vet well enough, and by default I'm endorsing them, and then I
Yeah.
find out that they're not who I thought they were, and I had to take their show down. So I was always protective of my audience and my own credibility.
So actually, on that note, I'm very curious. Do you just do that? Well, so there's a few different scenarios, right? Throughout the conversation, you realize, okay, they're actually trying to peddle the products or whatever. So you have a few options. One, communicate with them. Two, just don't even post them. Three, you realize afterwards, after you post it and publish the episode, again, right? You tell them, you not tell them. Like, what do you do? Because I'm asking that question because that's something that I also grapple with as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the exact same situation where I feel like I'm the protector of my peers per
Mm-hmm.
se, but to me it's quality, right?
Yep.
Like does it have enough quality to warrant the time and effort to listen to the conversation? That's the
Right.
way I look at it. So how do I find that, how do I be cordial? Because the last thing I want is waste another person's time, and I want to show respect, right? So how do you navigate that space, out of curiosity?
Well, it's evolved because now there's so many people reaching out to be on the show.
Mm.
Whereas first I had to introduce myself and even explain what a podcast was back in 2013, 2014. So now there's this people that have facilitators that create an introduction. Those are easy to know that I'm not interested. I want a true connection with the person. I want to know the person. So if they're not introduced or I don't already know them in some way, shape, or form, I usually don't have them on the show because it makes the conversation really choppy. If I'm on guard for their hype or their pitch, I want it to be really raw and relevant. And so I'll tell them if I invite somebody on, I'm going to give you a chance to plug your site or your Instagram feed or whatever at the end, but I ask them not to pitch or hype. And most of the people, I've done enough work that I know that they're not that type of person, that they're really there to deliver value. But I set that frame now. Before, I wasn't wise enough. And I kind of was interested to know like some of these tech pieces that you'd install into your business systems or clinical systems. And so I was curious and I thought it was a true value. But when I found out that they overpromise and underdeliver, I would tell them like, I don't feel like I can feature you on my site and my webcast on my podcast, and then I would promptly take it down, and
So
they
you
wouldn't
do tell
rebut.
them.
What's that?
So you do tell them.
I would tell them. Yeah, I felt like that was the only high integrity thing to do. I've never not posted a podcast that I recorded, but I've taken a handful down over time.
I see. Yeah, I mean, because as podcasters, we also, I mean, I don't know about you being featured as a guest a lot yourself. Okay, so I have been featured as a guest as well. One of my biggest pet peeves is we have a conversation, I give them my heart and write everything I got, and then say, "Oh, sorry, it's not posted." Then that's like,
I've
that's
never
like the
experienced
biggest.
that. I've never.
That is the worst.
Yeah,
that is the worst.
The biggest snags are for me. 2 or 3 times I had like oh my gosh, I can't believe this person's on my show, and out of nerves, I forgot to record. It like 90 seconds in, and you're like, do you mind if we start over? But yeah, I'm pretty proud of the product we've put out there.
Yeah.
I've developed as an interviewer, but my guests by and large know that we're here to deliver value. And I think I'm better at setting that as this is the non-negotiable about being on the show.
Yeah.
And I people don't buck very hard. I feel like when you've set that, this is the context of what we're going to be doing today.
So one of my, well, as we were talking about before we started recording this, I treated this as a craft. This is a dharmic path for me, right? So I'm quite serious when I want to like look at it pre-game, during, and post-game type of analysis. That's the way I look at life. So
I can tell you're a total pro. Yeah.
Thank you, and I appreciate that coming from you. 350 episodes, that means a lot. What was I going with that? Oh, right. So I've also heard other podcasters where they record something they thought was going to be good, but doing the post-production aspect of it, they just couldn't come up with that compelling narrative. So they'll go back and tell the guests like, "Hey, sorry, we didn't quite get it. Do you mind recording over again?" I haven't had that experience yet. Have you ever had that experience where you just didn't quite capture it? You know, the guest or you just couldn't quite co-create that magic that you were hoping to co-create, and then you had to go back and do it again. Have you ever done that?
I know what you're speaking of. I tend to ship everything. I figure that there's some value in gems in there, no matter what. And I also know myself to be really self-critical. And so I would never be happy with any one episode. So I don't typically listen to my episodes until it's already been edited. So I immediately ship it off to somebody that does all that post-production as the intro and outro, because I know that if I start nitpicking, one, it's going to suck up a ton of my time, and two, I'm not going to feel good afterwards because I look through everything still through a dental lens of microns and millimeters, and I'll count I'll do, oh, I blew that question, all of that sort of thing. And so I just trust that the reps will make me better. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but for me, it's the only way that the show gets done.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So if I were to compare it, you do it more of a Joe Rogan style, right? Very little editing, long form, no sound bites, just maybe some minor corrections of the sound, and
Yeah.
plug in the advertisement, the intro, outro, and then that's it. That's
Yeah.
your style.
I'm usually about 40 minutes, so it's not traditional long form, but it's enough to really get to know the audience and get 2 or 3 gems that the audience can utilize on Monday. If they can't do that, if they can't take something from idea to action, I consider that a fail. I don't want to be edutainment. And so to me, 40 minutes is adequate there. And it's just easier. I mean, again, it's a realistic thing. I've gone an hour and a half, I've gone 20 minutes, but that seems to be the sweet spot. But I also appreciate that.
Can you pause?
Please. Yeah.
How did you find that sweet spot? What makes you choose, 40 minutes, this is a sweet spot, versus 20, versus an hour 30, versus 3 hours?
I think a coach told me that was a typical commute in the city early on.
I got it.
Yeah.
So you design it for commute time.
I wanted it to be one listen, like one workout, one run, one commute. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes logical sense. Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah.
My first coach in podcasting, because I had no idea. I didn't know recording tech. I didn't know how to introduce myself. Was John Lee Dumas, who's done incredibly well in this space. And he had to take me from literally rags. I have this idea. What are you going to call it? I don't know. Relentless Dentist is an oxymoron to me. Let's call it Relentless Dentist. It stuck. It took off. But things were so raw in the beginning that I literally needed a bit of a recipe because I was so scared. I mean, literally, interestingly, at the time, I was really into the study of fear. And I'd read several books on fear. And still to this day, this quote by Joseph Campbell, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek," kept like eating at me. And I was like, I don't want to do it. So I know I have to do it. And what has been on the other side of it was pure magic. But I can tell, I remember those first days when I recorded, and I would batch them. I would do 2 or 3 because that's what John told me to do. And it was like running a marathon because everything had to be super scripted for me. A lot of my audience were fact finders. They wanted to know the questions in advance. And it was like hard labor at first. So going back to your conversation of a young aspiring podcaster, know that it's going to be messy up front because a lot of these things are completely foreign, particularly if you're interviewing people that you really admire and respect. And to me, these were heroes in the industry when I was first reaching out. Know that it's going to be messy, and then it becomes, the magic is all in the reps, and also recognizing that opportunity knocks in weird directions and in weird ways, and to just keep saying yes and doing the thing that you fear has really been the journey that I've appreciated most.
Okay, so before we talk about what's the potential payoff or this magic, right, serendipitous, synchronicity that happens later on. So, put a holding space there.
Sure.
Let's see. So you go right into the heroes of yours right away. Yeah.
My number one hero is my first guest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is ballsy, actually. I admire that because so knowing what I know now, and by the way, Noble Warrior is my second podcast.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I quit my first podcast after 10 episodes because I was so attached to the numbers and the feedback, the accolades, and all these things. So, knowing what I know now, I'll tell the younger CK, keep going. You like having conversations with people. This is something that you actually enjoy. Learn to enjoy the journey. The outcome is more of a secondary effect, but don't count on it, from the start.
I totally agree. It's that's an arduous path. If you want some quick wins, like especially now in a noisy crowd, like it's really hard to get traction. And so you kind of have to fall in love with the process. I totally agree with that.
And I would also soften the start. So instead of going into interviewing my heroes, episode 1, I'll soften it up with like just talking to friends. And actually even just talk to 6 of your friends, or even just one friend 6 times. It doesn't matter. Just the whole idea, as you said earlier, is about the reps, right?
Yeah.
and then pre-record it if you choose after 6 episodes of talking to 6 different friends, or just get the reps in. If you choose not to publish because you didn't find enjoyment in it, don't publish. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Totally okay. And also know that your first will be your worst.
Yeah.
So the more you do it, the better you'll get. So some of my friends, they don't even listen to their episodes at all, like you, right?
Yeah.
You don't even listen to it until maybe you publish. But my friend, he doesn't even listen to any of it at all. So that's his creative process. I do, because I'm a pre-game,
Yeah. No,
mid-game,
I
post-game.
wish I was more like that. Yeah, for sure.
So okay, so one common theme that people always complain about, especially when they're starting doing this, is the sound of their voice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so knowing what you know now, what do you think? How would you say to the younger Davids, or those people who are starting and have this persistent complaint about the sound of their voice?
I think it's a journey in authenticity. Just be you. I mean, you're not going to resonate with everyone, and that's a win. You don't want to be everything to everyone. And in my multiple careers, the more I drift to this is what I truly want to do, and I need to leverage who I truly am, the better it seems the results seem to get. So sure, I can be more eloquent. Sure, I can be more enthusiastic, and that's part of the journey. But you're comparing your worst work, your fumbles and your interceptions, to someone's highlight reel, no doubt, when you step into that critic. And so it's normal, but also know that you should ship it anyway, because to me, the real payoff is knowing that you're speaking to one person, and there's one person on the other line that needs to hear you say what you're saying right now. And it could shift a life. It could save a life. It's hard to really know, but know that getting it out there, or know getting out there is important, and holding it back is the antithesis of what you're trying to do: serve, impact, act of kindness, all those sorts of things. So all that to say, I think you have to be authentically you, and there's a little tribe of the world that's looking for that thing. I've never seen anything to the contrary.
So generally, principally agree with you 100%. I have something to share about that as well.
Please.
But let's actually focus on the voice part, right?
Okay.
Because some people's complaint is, I hate my voice. I don't like the way it sounds. It doesn't sound like me. Or, why do I sound one octave higher? It's so weird, right? Like that kind of internal stuff. So I had it. I didn't like listening to it. I cringe when I think about even just the way I ask questions. I fumble over words. It's not grammatically correct. I have an accent, all these things, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how I'm formulating the question. Yeah, talk too much. All these things before I ask my question. And then another one is the sound of my voice. So there is that too. But interestingly enough, personal journey. One, get better equipment. So if you have a pretty good mic, it actually comes through nicely, right? So
true.
there's this, the sound is bassier. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, satisfy my vanity when I hear my voice to be very, very deep, right? More masculine that way. So that takes care of that. The other stuff just comes with time. That's my journey personally. I actually, and I shared this publicly. I'll share this with you. I listen to my podcast as a fan. I am my biggest fan of my own podcast.
Oh, that's amazing.
Not from a place of ego, oh, I'm the best, but I get to enjoy my guests in a different way. As an audience, rather than as the host, I have to juggle 7 things in the background.
It is a different experience. I totally agree. Yeah. Some of my, like when I get an author on that I really love, I sometimes listening back, I don't remember. I'm so into the zone or maybe nervous that listening to it, I hear things for the first time, even though it's not the first time. So I should do more of it. But again, I've learned to protect myself from myself. But yeah, the one thing that I'll say about audio quality is that I was completely naive going on in my story in my head was the words and the conversation is all that mattered. And it took me a long time, and it could still use some upgrades to really start to develop my production quality. But yeah, I think getting a good audio system, mic recording, editing, if you wish, all of those, intro, outro, it all matters. Details matter. And I was somewhat oblivious to it in the beginning because I was so early to the game.
Yeah. So for anyone listening who is thinking about, okay, now that David and CK has said equipment is important, I'm gonna spend 6 months finding the right equipment. No, that's not what we're saying.
No.
Okay, that don't misinterpret that. So the words I want to emphasize here. Listen up. The words I want to emphasize is good enough.
Yeah.
As long as you have an equipment that's good enough. So if an iPhone is good enough for you, great, do that. If you want the Joe Rogan level pro mic, if you can afford it, if that's good enough for you, do that. For me, my mic is, I don't know, it's like sub $100, and I have a Zoom H6, and that's good enough for me. And this is the way I sound, and the rest is more the reps, the craft,
for sure,
the curiosity. So what do you say to?
Yeah, I think minimal viable product is the way to go. Just ship it. I've upgraded my my mic probably every 2 years for 7 years. So this is version 4.0, and it still could be improved. Like now I'm being critical of my video quality and lighting because now I'm recording, but it's not stopping me from getting stuff out there. We keep saying it, but the magic is all in the reps, and know that you're on this trend line, and your production will follow that just from the reps, and you'll pick up on the little things that you want to upgrade next. But if you want Super Bowl level podcast right off the bat, one, it's not really that valuable to you because it takes a while to develop an audience. And two, it's just another sexy excuse like perfectionism and all of these things that we use as high performers to keep you from entering. So the barrier to entry is super low. And anyone who has a curiosity, like you said, I think should start by, I'm a jump in with both feet kind of guy, as I mentioned before with my first guest, but at least dip your toe in the water and get something out there, because it's not as scary as you think. A lot of the demons are in your head, and you'll realize after a handful of episodes that people out there that need to hear you are listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason, so I kind of said, I'm in the presence of a legend, being facetious, but I'm also not. If you actually look at the stats right now, so I believe 2020, Apple Podcast have registered close to 1.2 to 1.6 million podcasts.
Okay.
Yeah. So still pretty early in the game if you really think about it. However, half of, actually more than half, like 80% of them are going to drop off sub 10 episodes, like my first podcast. And then 80% of that is going to drop off sub 100. So if you really think about, David, what he's accomplished, what I have accomplished, is a very, very small percentage that we are able to persist more than 10 episodes, 100 episodes, in David's case, 250
Thanks
episodes.
for saying that.
Yeah. So, props to you for keep going at it.
Yeah. It's, I mentioned it before, but it's opened so many amazing doors that.
Yes. Let's talk about that. So what were some of the things that amazing that happened that you expected, and what are some of the amazing things happen that you just you never expected?
Well, within a year of launching the podcast, so I launched in July, it was less than half of a year. My life just fell apart. My wife had a stroke. I had a 3-yard at home. And when things got really dark for me in 2014, like this is surreal as I even tell you this, I was starting to build up an audience, because what else are you going to listen to? There's only 2 dental podcasts, right? And I was struggling. My business was struggling. I was a horrible leader. I was just a broken man. And I remember having this conversation of, what do they think, the audience think, if the relentless dentist gives up? And it actually ended up being the motivation of like, I can't let these people down. I can let this little boy down, Bennett. I know I'm role modeling for him. I can't let my team down. I can't let these people down. So it was this idea that I started, I called it relentless dentist because it was an oxymoron. Most dentists aren't relentless. No one would think them. They're kind, they're compassionate, they're servant leaders. But I knew that all of my breakthroughs were courageous, and they came from persistence. And it seemed like so hypocritical to just say, hey, like, I'm selling the practice, I'll get an associateship and we'll find an easier life. And so that was the biggest win, was the motivation to know that people are watching, listening, tuned into the story. And if I pull the plug, it would have been the absolute wrong message to send. So that was first and foremost, like the thing that I couldn't have engineered, that really saved me, is that piece of the podcast. Beyond that, business opportunities, the best friends that I have in the world were 1 or 2 degrees separation from somebody I met from the podcast or a speaking engagement. I fell in love with all the other doors that opened for me, the speaking, the writing books, the coaching. And then I ended up leaving clinical dentistry because of this path that opened up for me that I didn't even have a monetization plan at the time, but I just kept saying yes to things that scared me and meeting people that I was slightly intimidated by. And it's like created a complete shift in who I am, what I do. Now I kind of trust fall into opportunities, saying like, well, let's just see. It sounds like an adventure. If it ends up, being not what I thought it would, fine. So I'm now really easy, as opposed to what I used to do is like, here's my vision, here's my 5-year plan. I'm a lot more exploring because of that experience, because the things that I thought would be home runs never were. The things that I thought were like, okay, that was pretty good, people were like, oh, I quit my job because of that message. And I was like, I don't even remember saying that. So it's been a surreal experience. And it's all, I think, a byproduct of the things that I keep mentioning, of like doing the thing that you're most scared of, and knowing that there's usually magic on the other side, but you can't really engineer what that payout is going to be.
I love that. Well, first of all, thank you for talking about the relentless dentist, how that is an inspiration and how that saved you.
Yeah.
My first podcast name is Entrepreneurs on Purpose. And I quit after 10 episodes. I wasn't on purpose.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, that did not save me. So now I'm looking at No More Worry in a different light, thanks to you. No, but honesty, why this was particularly meaningful for me, this podcast, and then realizing that this is my dharmic path. And then here's an intellectual question that those of you who are listening can do as well. If you have all the money and time and resources in the world, would you still be doing this? If the answer is yes, then this is something that you actually want to do. So for me, the answer is yes. Even if I have all the money in the world, then I would double, triple down on this. Like that would be the dream job for me. Like just constantly having great conversations with great people, who have the best of hearts and then the greatest of minds, and capabilities and everything. So yeah, like that's the dream. So Noble Warriors.
I totally agree. I think the way I look at podcasting now, I used to be in athletic medicine, and I remember on the sidelines, there were all these people standing over here and like, what are they doing? And like, well, they have a press pass. Well, are they writing? Are they reporting? Like, no, they just have a great seat to the football game. And I feel like that's what podcasting gives me, is like a unfair access to conversations that are really meaningful to me. And I would love it to just be coffee between 2 friends or a beer between 2 friends. And many of the conversations are that, but we get to record it and now scale the conversation. So it may add to the life of somebody else. Like, you can't, to me, I can't beat that opportunity. I can't beat the friendships and the connections. And I'm a rugged individualist. Like most of my life, I'm like, I don't need anybody. I'm the lone wolf. I can handle it. And like cliche stuff like your network is your net worth. I was like, whatever. Now, like this whole term net worth has a completely different idea for me, because
So actually unpack
help.
that. Yeah, unpack that, because I would say most people listening, chances are, and which is totally okay, are looking at the extrinsic motivators, like,
Mhm.
I have a platform, I get to be the thought leader, and yes, do that. I'm not saying not to do that, but
Mhm.
it sounds like it has a more of a, even like a spiritual connotation,
Mhm.
right, to you. So unpack the word net worth for you.
To me, particularly like going back to when Kara had her stroke in 2014, I was going to create this epic dental practice. I was going to keep adding doctors. In those moments where life slams you up against the wall and says, "What are you made of?" You know, or I knew at that point in time, most of my pursuits were trivia, and most of the things I was ignoring were the super valuable. I still sometimes run across Facebook messages and texts from that period of time of people who I knew who reached out that I don't remember, because I was in crisis. I got hundreds of them, but in those moments, you realize that it's the human connection that all that matters. It was a conversation that I remember having with our father that night. He said, "I don't care if I have to live under the bridge the rest of my life as long as she walks out of here." And she walked out of here, but I had to take that. I had to take that lesson. And sometimes I still get distracted by the pursuit of things, but in my heart, I always know that it's like the investment, the equity, the deposits that I'm making in others, those that they make in me, that all that matters. Because a lot of these things, if taken away from me, I can rebuild. That's part of the game, I think, in life. Like you're developing skills and mindsets, but that part I can't rebuild. And so I want to make sure that I'm not building bridges. I want to make sure that I'm giving more than I'm taking, because I ignored a lot of that, and still thankfully those people were there for me in that time that I really needed them. And if I can be that person for somebody else, either through an earbud or a phone call or a message, like sometimes I'll just reach out to people and say, "Hey, I'm rooting for you." And it's
Mm,
amazing the amount of times that people will say, that I needed to hear that today. Right. And
mm,
so we're all fighting battles. And the more I can pave somebody's path, I'm happy to do it at charge, at no charge. Like to me, it really is that kind of spiritual quest where I'm going into those internal motivators and trying to understand at deeper and deeper levels. How do I find a path of mastery that never ends? How do I create a path of purpose that never ends? Certainly there'll be zigzags along the way, but um, it really feels like the interesting thing about conversations like this is that classically I'm an introvert, but I never leave a deep conversation like this not feeling energetically way higher than when I started. And to me,
mm,
that means that I'm doing the right thing. I'm
mm,
getting as much as I'm giving. And so to me, if it's that natural and that little friction, how can I avoid it? How can I deny that call?
I so appreciate. Well, I'm an introvert too, in case you don't know. In case it's not obvious for anyone watching, I'm totally an introvert. I would say thank you for pointing out that how you feel. You
Mm,
can call it aliveness, you can call it inspiration, you can call it whatever, spiritual energy. That's the reason why I want to always do this. This is everything that David just pointed to, because it's it, for me, it's something is draining or contracting. It's very palpable to me, something that's expansive
mm,
or energizing. So I wanted, now having had attempts to do things that's contracting on the inside but it looks expansive on the outside. Having done that a few times, I'm like, oh, it's
mm.
not worth it anymore for me. I
Yeah.
actually just want to do things that matters to me.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing out to that. And for those of you listening, like we said earlier, do a few episodes if you like doing it. If it's expansive for you, if it's energizing for you, if it's meaningful for you, keep doing it. If it
Yeah.
feels like, oh my god, I can't believe I need to have a conversation with another
Yeah. If there's
person,
dread.
or you're so stressed and about the performance, or you're like trying to figure out what to say to the camera if you're doing a solo podcast, hey, maybe it's not for you. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. um but your format's also shifted over the years, right? Because I know that you and I were talking tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'm not a dentist, obviously. So can you share with us a little bit of a journey, how you have shifted the content itself over over the years?
Yeah. So my original plan was to bring insights from outside of dentistry to dentistry. And I kind of let my vision get hijacked a little bit because I was able to connect with so many people in the industry, and I kind of forgot that idea. But all of my insights, all of my breakthroughs as a professional came from outside the industry: marketing experts, leadership experts, high performance experts. And then I would bring them to my own dojo, my own practice, and I would implement them. And they would work far better than anything that I ever heard in a dental conference. And so I wanted to create that channel for dentistry. And I spent more and more time amongst dental colleagues, and it became this kind of like very generic, almost incestuous message of like, oh, yeah, we've heard this. And I knew in my heart it wasn't the best information available. And so I've slowly gotten to the point where it's rare that I speak to a dentist or somebody in the dental industry. I get the most insights and the most gain from thought-provoking questions that they might see a blind spot that we don't see because we're right here doing things in the mouth or in our practices. And so I went from very, very scripted, like literally like questions all listed, to now something more organic. And part of the adrenaline rush for me is going into unknown territory, meaning somebody I don't know very well. This morning I spoke to a hypnotist, and that was like so fun to explore his way of communicating and how we might apply that to our self-talk, our leadership, our patient care, our businesses. So I needed a new challenge, I think, for my own selfish quest. But also I felt like this message in dentistry seems more the same, more the same, more the same. And the value is really something over here. And so I think any interesting conversation about how do you bring out the best in a person is a valuable conversation for my audience. So if they don't wear a mask and gloves, all the better, because I think they bring us unique and valuable insights. And so that's been my quest for the last year or so, is to just bring on interesting people and have on interesting conversations. And I know the industry well enough that I can convert an idea, shift it a few degrees, and say, here's an application you can use on Monday. And I don't want to be ever more of the same. I want to be unique and valuable. And so I'm willing to innovate to be able to do that. And I'm always keeping my eye on new opportunities and new conversations, because it seems to serve the greater good. It serves the guest, serves me, and it serves anyone that might be listening.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, this reminds me of the approach that I was trained at, right? Being a PhD scientist, the whole point is to push the boundary of knowledge, right? Even just a tiny bit, right? Be the ultra specialist in that area. So that's one approach, right? That requires years and years of dedication, and if people are into that, that's all good for them. There's actually kind of a hack, right? The hack is, as you call it, well, you didn't call it that. I'm calling it, is cross pollination.
Yeah.
I think Henry Ford brought something from, I believe, the cotton gin or something like that. It's the whole idea of manufacturing two cars.
Oh, assembly line. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea of assembly line from that industry to cars, like with that tiny little switch, the whole car industry was born, and he was able to cut that cost down, significantly because of that.
Yeah. It reminds me of another story. It might have been Ray Kroc. I think I don't know if McDonald's or some founder of a fast food picked up their laundry at a laundromat and a drive-through, and that was the innovation that led to drive-through fast food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially, you're being that cross pollinator, that bringing new ideas from the outside. You also have enough wherewithal within the industries to translate that
Yeah.
in real time, right?
Yeah.
So I could see that. That's beautiful. Um, there was a question I wanted to ask you. Totally forgot. Well, it's gonna come back to me. Oh, I don't remember. It'll come back to me when
Oh,
it's
good.
time. Yeah. Is there anything else that specifically that you want to discuss? That you want to transfer this wealth of knowledge that you have, the wisdom you have, to the younger David?
It's, to me, I wasn't curious enough early on. And I think that probably showed in the conversation, is that I was trying to produce a product. And in hindsight, I wish I would have just sat down and had conversation with some of these first guests. And when I do that, I feel like it's a great episode where I'm just like incredibly curious. The more scripted or the more regimented that I am, the more it seems to like be this robotic exercise. Well, thank you for coming. Like I can feel it, right? And so I prepare still. I'll usually write 10 questions down just as show prep, but then I usually throw them out. It's kind of like war planning, like what Tyson says, everyone has a plan to get punched in the mouth. I just do it purely as prep to make sure that I have enough of a knowledge base that I can ask intriguing questions. But now I'm more trustful that I'll come up with the right best question. And that's all driven by curiosity. And if you serve your curiosity, you know that you're serving many other people's curiosity.
That is such an important point that you make. If you actually look at it from, you can call it listener experience, or you can call it the energetics of it. Podcast is nothing more than an amplifier of what's happening right here and now. So if I'm into it, you can feel it.
Yeah.
If I'm curious about David, you can for sure feel it. But if I'm speaking today is David Maloley, we're going through the motion. Like, so it would be a really boring podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to break somebody else's scripted act a little bit too. And so
okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What is a way that you have come across as way to, interrupt, disrupt that pattern of, all right, this is my 300th podcast interview, blah, blah, blah.
I just ask an off the wall question to disrupt their pattern. Because to me, it's very clear if, okay, this is what they would say in a keynote and they're just transferring it to the show. So asking for an application to dentistry, or saying, hey, my audience is very blah, blah, blah. Can you speak to that? Tends to break their pattern a little bit and get them to a more authentic frame. So that gets them thinking, as opposed to this rote rehearsal type conversation. So if I see that happening where it's like, oh my gosh, it's like Billy Joel playing Piano Man for the 4,000th time, I'll immediately go to something that I had no intention of asking.
One thing that I'm testing right now, and this, I'm curious to know your thoughts. So when I hear someone like Joe Polish just being totally upfront about what he's struggling with as a human being, the rawness of his humanity, he said in one breath, I'm a sex addict, I'm an alcoholic, I have low self-esteem, and I'm doing everything I can to overcome that. It was a single breath. Mm-hmm. The admiration I have for him just like double and quadruple, because I know how much courage it requires to be totally public about, the innermost thoughts that no one ever shared with anyone else, but he just like owned it 100%. So I'm curious to know. So that's one technique, right? As a way, a tactical empathy technique, right? As a way, share something, as a way to invite my guests to be a little bit more open.
Yep.
I'm still practicing that. Can't say that I'm a master of that, like Joe Polish is.
Yeah, right.
I'm curious to know, Have you ever used that? And two, what's your journey of being, more and more open and slash vulnerable as a way to invite, right, your guests to be more open and vulnerable?
On my show, my audience knows that I have no secrets. Like I talk about sleepless nights, pain, insecurities. To me,
Did you start off there from episode one?
yeah, I did. I started well after um, Kara got home from the hospital. I did an interview with her, and she could barely speak. And it was just, I just always went to the like, what's the podcast that I want? And to me, the flaw in the industry was I was seeing everyone's best work and highlight reel, and it was making me feel not better but worse. I was paying all this money to see work that I never thought I'd be able to do. So I want to know about your best work and your patient hates it. I want to know about the day when your top team member resigned and you never saw them again. And so I shared all of those things because to me, that's what I needed to hear, is that not every day is perfect. Some days you wonder, why the heck did you get into this profession? And the more I spoke of that from the podcast and from stage, the more I saw people now willing to say, like, my October was a miserable thing. And not to the point of whining, but just saying, like, this is part of the human experience. My business doesn't always go up and to the right. My team isn't always this highly collaborative, super self-performing, self-managing team, but this is all that I heard. And so I wanted a more authentic conversation. And so I've always thought that as an entrepreneur, if the thing that you want isn't out there, you're obligated to create it. And so I just always have. I talk about my passion for fatherhood, all of these things, that Team Mutiny. So I'll talk about my wins, but I think the real value is about talking about that day that goes sideways and how you recovered from it. So I think it's super, super important. And it's still hard for me to get that out of guests, but I feel a shift where people are willing to say, hey, listen, this is me. This is my journey. If you don't like it, okay. But if I hear nothing but wins, I feel like I'm looking at a liar. So
Same here.
yeah.
So here's actually one other technique Andrew Warner shared as a way to, if he encounters someone who is wins, and then he just could not get more openness out of the guest, he would say, it must be really nice for someone like you to be winning all the time. For the rest of us who are struggling, that's really awesome. So that's another opening, right? They have a chance to be like, well, it's not all wins, right? So it's an invitation, but he doesn't rub it into people's face and force them to.
Somebody once told me, and I'm not power hungry, but I know what it's like to feel like the weakest person in a room of really smart people. And their quote was, the most powerful person in the room is the one that has nothing to hide. And I actually heard Joe on your podcast say, we're only as sick as our secrets. So there's something about keeping that all in that's a really toxic pattern. So I think the more that we can communicate from our heart, from the top of the mountain and the depths of despair, the easier it all gets for all of us.
So you're speaking to someone who is on a journey, who has the aspiration and the intention to be more and more open, and not as open as you are yet, right? So you're a few steps ahead of me. One, can you describe that experience, that freedom that you experience as, being totally open to your audience? And two, what would you say someone who's on his journey to be more open, and not for the sake of being open, but for the sake of serving his audience, serving the people listening?
I usually experience it in a live format. It's a lot easier, but I'll still get reaches out about, it really touched me when you said this, and then they relate it to some experience that they have. But I don't think my industry is unique. People kind of think that they're a category of one and their problems are unique. And once you help them see that somebody that they admire or somebody they look up to or somebody that at least they listen to still gets their ass kicked once in a while, now they know that is not this trend line down. It's just a dip in the road. And I've had at dental conferences, I've had some of the most amazing conversations. It's usually at the bar. Sometimes it's after a few cocktails. And I get the feeling that some of these conversations is the first time that they've had them, but you can tell like they just can't wait. Like, hey, I really liked your speech. And then all of a sudden, like you hear about someone losing an infant child or somebody who is really successful on the outside, maybe has a full bank account, but they literally hate their life and their job. So it gives them a cue and a permission that I can have this conversation and I'm not going to be judged. So it's this permission slip. Yeah.
I appreciate that. So what would you say to someone on his journey to be more open? Because certainly, so I know that at times I may come across as the guy from the mountaintop, right? Here's the monk, you know, with the equanimity principles and mental models. That's really not what I'm intending to be. What I'm intending to be is, hey, you know, I'm just like on this human journey as well. I may be a few steps ahead of you. I've learned some things, and then if you like what I'm sharing, try it on. If you don't like it, you know, good luck to you, kind of a thing. So
I think to me the magic pill is we as humans feel fear and its resistance, and we usually use it as a cue to retreat. If you can train yourself to use that as a cue to move forward, like, okay, that's what I must do. Like every time I speak, I put something in the presentation, even if it's completely like keynote that I've given several times, I'll insert something in there that literally scares the hell out of me. I've done Jack Nicholson impersonations. I've done all sorts of things. And it's usually the thing that lands the best. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go, but the only way my comfort zone expands is if I push. One time I went to the top of the stage and I said, what are you scared of? And it was 600 people. What are you scared of? And I just like looked around, and that deathly silence was the thing that was most scared to me. But immediately that was the very beginning of the presentation. It got all of their attention. And the rest of the time I had a captive audience. So to me, knowing that there's that resistance there and that's the trigger, usually to move past, once we use that as a trigger to move forward, then you're off to the races, because you'll see the wins, you'll feel the feedback, and those things that you're like, I can't tell that right now, become the thing that you must talk about right now.
I love that. And that's so fun too. Jack Nicholson impression. Oh my God. That's awesome. Is that part
of the clarity? And I did a scene from A Few Good Men.
You Can't Handle the Truth? Yeah.
I won't do it again. I need that was a one-off.
Actually, so as you know, I'm a systems guy, right? So do you build into the structure of the show? So for example, Hot Ones, because I know you just got a present for your son, right?
Yeah, you saw that?
I did. So I never received a gift that gave me so much anxiety or something.
Yeah. He's a funny kid.
Yeah, no, it's great. But Hot Ones build that intrigue into the show. It's predictable. You know, it's basically eating increasingly more spicy hot wings, and it also makes it super compelling, right? So I'm thinking in my mind, generate or create or designate a segment to be like Hot Ones, to be a little bit lighter, right? So it's very clear to the guests. We're gonna do an exercise. It's gonna be a little silly, maybe an impression or whatever. Do you think about things like that as a sort of they know they're gonna get this segment no matter what?
Oh, I forgot. I started off at the end. I would do, I call it the relentless round. I would ask 6 rapid fire questions, and I don't even remember why I abandoned it, but it was really good because there was some depth to the questions. There was some humor and levity to the questions, but it was the same questions every single time. And it would really pull the personality out of a guest, where typically at first it was more academic and intellectual, and I wanted to make it a little bit more raw. And that was the secret sauce. And I can't remember why I scrapped that. I might have to bring that back.
Hey, man, you are welcome. So you started with the rapid rounds, or you end
Yeah, relentless round at the end. 6
at
rapid
the
fire
end?
questions. Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't start with that. So I'm
No.
curious to know, placement wise, don't you think it would be get them into that playful mode from the
Yeah.
start?
Yeah,
Versus,
100%. Yeah. I'm
yeah.
going to
So
bring it back when you come on the show.
tomorrow morning, baby. Tomorrow morning. That's
Careful what you ask for.
oh, hey, I'm ready. No more warrior, baby. Okay, so one thing that people always ask. Well, actually, I have a follow-up question that I want to ask about the monetization thing, because
Okay.
monetization people always want to know. But I'm
Yep.
curious to know this. Now you have curated 350 episodes. That means 350 well-respected hero peers that you have access to. Is there anything that you do as a way to cultivate this network of, thought leaders, peers, heroes, as a way to serve them or help them or monetize or any kind of things that you do?
I wish I would have sent them all a gift. I've received that a couple times, and it's doesn't need to be much. It could be your favorite book, all of those sorts of things. I've been off and on with it, but now I'm thinking about this more as a business as opposed to a thing I do on Fridays when I'm already tired from a clinical schedule. So that's the one thing that I started implementing. I'll send out hats, journals. I've got lots of swag with Relentless Dentist on it, and it's just a nice gesture because it's super valuable. And a lot of these people, like, I don't want it to be a one-off conversation. I want to know them forever. And so I always, going back to the equity, like making deposits and things like that, I want to make sure that I wasn't a taker in that relationship. And I'm afraid in hindsight, sometimes I got more, they gave more value than I gave them. And to me, to automate that through make it easy through send out cards, something like that is something that I wish I would have done a long time ago. I did it for my referrals in my practice, and it's transformative. Gourmet brownies, whatever it may be, it doesn't need to be a big cost, and there's a ways to make it a really easy system. But as I'm moving into 2021, I'm reconfiguring and re-engineering all these things. Like, what did you do by default and not by design? And how do we, if we're starting day zero, January 1st, 2021, what are the things that now advising yourself that you wish you would have always done, that you tried and worked and then abandoned, all of those things? The end of the year is always a big clarity week for me, where I review the final week and then I kind of envision or the previous year and envision the year ahead. And to me, that's of critical importance because differentiation is really important. And I don't want to be in a sea of sameness, and I also don't want to be ever perceived as a taker in a relationship.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So a couple of resources for you. Giftology. I don't know if you read that book yet.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, that's something to consider if gifting is an important thing for you. What else? What was the second one? You may come back to me in a bit. I don't remember. Oh man.
Send Out Cards is a company that I have quite a bit of experience with.
Giftology is a book. So
okay.
Yeah, but then they also have similar, type of service, right?
Okay.
A way to systematically cultivate that relationship.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
With their VIPs.
Yeah.
And I asked that question also for me is something I want to figure out because notoriously, I don't have a system to keep in touch with certain people in my life. When I think about them, I make a point to text them.
Yeah, same.
But because I have 100 people now on my podcast, and I'm there's more VIPs, and I just don't have the bandwidth to systematically do it. Also, I was curious about how you go about it. I remember what I was gonna say now. In my conversation with Brandon Adams, he had a system essentially to have good touch points with his VIPs. And I really like the way he said it. He said, if you want their attention, give them money
Mm,
or send them deals, because that's a very direct, currency. You know, people always take your calls when
yeah,
you want to pay them, right?
yeah,
And sort of the meta symbolic uh, gratitude, gifts and things like that, and
yeah,
that also help, words of affirmation, right? Different languages of love, but money
yeah.
seems direct. So,
The other thing that I started doing that seems really valuable is that my virtual assistants now will create an audio soundbite and a video clip that isn't intended to be shared on my social media. It's intended to feature them. It'll have my little logo on it, and that kind of happened by accident. But the reception of like, oh gosh, like this really helps us out. Like it's authority building. It's shows that they're, most of my guests aren't on dentists podcasts, but it shows that they have this global value. So that's a nice thing to do, is to allow them something that's really easy to post and give them additional attention and credibility.
do you send them the raw file or the link?
I send them the links. Sometimes I'll ask for the raw file and I'll send it over, but only if requested.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is because if it's a raw file, they can embed it into their accounts versus a YouTube link, then it's still, piped through your account, which is a little bit different.
Oh
Just a,
yeah.
a little
I'll
nuance.
send them the edited file. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
little nuance for them. Very good, man. Last question is the question that people always want to ask. Monetization.
Mm-hmm.
So having gone through this for 7 years, 350 episodes, how do you think about monetization?
For me, it's the podcasting is the foundation of my coaching business, and now it's my full-time gig. And without the social equity that I would have built up over the years, introducing myself to the marketplace would have been very, very difficult. So the podcast has led to speaking. The speaking has led to a revenue stream. I donate 100% of my speaking fees to a local organization called Vail Veterans. So it allows me to give back in multiple ways. But that's all essentially the marketing channel for my brand, myself, my unique ability, my unique frame on coaching. So I can't tell you that it was my intention. I originally was dumb enough to think that if I was the first dentist with a podcast, it would mean $1 million in my bank account, but I didn't have a system for it. I just thought like, well, here I am, a pioneer, pay me, right? And I got really uncomfortable with people advertising on my channel, and now I don't do any of that. I only occasionally will pitch myself, my services, something that I'm doing. But I really have only used it as a value front end, and it works really well from that, because ultimately I work with people who think like me, because I speak and coach to the dentist that I was 7 or 8 years ago and wish that I had as a resource. So if you come from that level of giving and it's genuine, I think people feel that and receive that, as opposed to a hype machine that gets, interrupted every 4 minutes with another pitch. And that's not the type of show that I want to listen to. And so that's not what I deliver. And to me, it's worked better than I could have expected, but I didn't have to, but I played the long game. I
Yeah.
just delivered value. Wherever I can, I deliver value. And there are periods in my life when I was more of a taker, and this is a lot more fun, a lot more genuine, a lot more, centered. It feels good. And the payoffs sometimes happen in ways that I could never, ever, ever engineer or expect. And so I always think of life through this Helen Keller quote: life is neither an enduring adventure or nothing. And so just throwing things out there and seeing what sticks, and always trying to give more than you take, to me is the ultimate marketing arm. It's authenticity, it's generosity, and I think the world is starved for that. So to me, the coaching back end is quite easy now because of that intention all along.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate you sharing this. Knowing what I know now, 100 episodes in, and this is what I'll say to the younger CK, regarding specifically around monetization. Be really clear about who you're speaking with, or who you're speaking to, rather. Like, who is the audience?
yeah.
Because the more you can be specific about the specific audience, and in my case, the same, right? The younger
Mhm.
version of CK, I know exactly what he's going through, but I didn't take the time, rather, to describe these attributes,
Yeah.
what struggles that he's grappling with. And I also wasn't self-aware enough or willing to be vulnerable enough to share what I know of the younger CK.
Uh,
So now being willing to do that, and I also know exactly what he's going through. Now I can speak to that specific individual. And then everything else you said, right? It's about just showing up, the energetic transmission, and getting to know our style. Hey, if any of you guys who's don't like to have your mental model clearly laid out, don't want the recaps, don't want to, like, don't talk to me because that's my style. I kind of walk in both realm of the rational and the spiritual. So if you
yeah.
don't like that, you just want the rational. If you just want the spiritual, I'm not your guy, which is
Yeah.
okay. So to me, is a if people want to get a sense of me, I even sent different dates to my podcast so they can get an idea of who I am. So
Mm.
yeah. Any last words that you wanted to share with the younger David, the younger CK, anyone who's even thinking about contemplating 2021, starting their own podcast?
I think I have to give the mic to Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Like, I have gone into that cave so many times. I've explained several times on the show, and there's never not been a treasure chest in there. Few times did I even know what I was going into that cave for. But if you feel like this itch called podcasting is something that needs to be scratched, start it tomorrow. Like, your recording means, your mechanisms, your interview model, you can rant and rave and go solo. There's so many different things, and you might have to experiment. You probably will, to figure out the right one for you. So waiting for the perfect time, waiting for the perfect resources is a bad idea. I say run into that cave and do it as soon as possible.
Yeah. Same here. I would give the same advice to younger CK. I started 2008. Had I kept going, I would have been the early ones.
Oh yeah. I didn't even ask you, when did you start?
No, but I didn't. I stopped after 10 episodes. So
What was the first show that you ever listened to?
that I ever listened to?
Yeah.
Well, the first few was the Tim Ferriss experiment,
Okay.
right? So there was that. I really liked that, and Lewis Howell at the time just got started, so I was paying attention to him a bit. But
so that'd be like 2014, something like that.
no, 2008, 2009 actually. Yeah, actually, it's very fuzzy. Like who I listen to, because I listen to so many things every day, so it's hard for me to keep track. But I just know 2008 to 12 ish is when I started the first podcast, and I stopped because I didn't get the traction. Damn.
No.
Which is okay. Great lesson in itself, and I'm sharing it from the pain that I have now to whoever is thinking about it. Don't think, start. So
Yeah.
with that said, David, thank you so much for being here.
It's an honor. Thank you so much.
With my group of aspiring podcasters.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's an honor to be your friend.
Likewise. Let me stop. All right.